Good evening, everyone, and welcome to 7 Stories Up. Chris Payne with Leslie Simon. Where are your boys tonight? We are delighted to have you all joining us tonight at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Allison Nellis, and I'm a supervising librarian of programming and outreach here at SNFL. Before we begin, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening's conversation possible. And I would also like to remind you that if you don't already have a library card, it's easy to get one by visiting any of our information desks throughout this building. And I would like to encourage you to visit NYPL's website and take a look at upcoming programs on our 7th floor, just like this one. We have an excellent lineup this season featuring new nonfiction, music, and more. And we would love to see you in this space again. And for those of you that don't know, the 3 public library systems in New York City are facing cuts upwards of $58 million for the next fiscal year. And if you have a moment, please visit investinlibraries.org to let City Hall know that keeping libraries fully funded keeps New York City running. And it is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Chris Payne is a Brooklyn-based music journalist whose writing has appeared in publications like Vulture, Stereogum, Literary Hub, and Billboard, and where he spent 7 years as a staff writer and podcast host covering alternative music and the indie side of the music industry. Where Are Your Boys Tonight is his first book, and you can find him on Twitter and Instagram at cpayne Leslie Simon is a writer, editor, and content strategist who treasures her business cards from past gigs at Paramount, Warner Records, MTV, and Alternative Press magazine. She is the co-author of the book Everybody Hurts, an essential guide to emo culture, and in addition to being an author of books like Geek Girls Unite, How Fangirls, Bookworms, Indie Chicks, and Other Misfits Are Taking Over the World, and Wish You Were Here, an essential guide to your favorite music scenes. Leslie currently lives in Los Angeles, where she enjoys watching the past seasons of This Old House with her rescue pup, Stanley Tucci. Leslie can be found online at Red Pattern Dress. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome tonight's speakers.
Yo, Leslie, look, so I brought my book here. Look what else I have.
Oh my God.
Leslie's book, Everybody Hurts.
It has a fold in the cover to prove you've read it.
I got more than that, Leslie.
Oh, yeah.
You did a signing at Vintage Vinyl in Fords, New Jersey in 2007.
It's true.
Remember this?
I do.
I remember this.
I do. That's my signature. It has not changed very much. And that was also one of our really quippy, our inscriptions that Trevor, Kelly, and I would write.
Tell all your friends.
Tell all your friends. I know, it works on so many levels. Taking Back Sunday, also word of mouth marketing. That's so sweet. Thank you.
That was a really good event. I hope ours today can be as good.
Yes. Oh my God, this is going to be amazing. Thank you, Chris, for having me. Thank the New York Public Library for having both of us. We're so excited to be here. We have been talking nothing but emo for the last 48 hours, which is usually just like a Sunday. But especially just to get the best nuggets for everybody here tonight, things that aren't in the books, things that you've experienced, I've experienced, the highs, the lows, the all-time lows, the everything in between.
Yeah, so I was trying to think of a way to make this the most interesting for you guys. Only have 40 minutes, which we could talk forever about this stuff. But I was thinking, between the two of us, we have interviewed so many of the big bands in this world. Tonight we broke it down to who we'll call the big four. It's Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Paramore, Panic at the Disco. We're going to focus on those 4. There's a Q&A, last 15 minutes, so I know we can't hit on every band, but if you guys have questions, anything about any of the others or those 4, save it for the Q&A. We'll be answering your questions, but Leslie wrote the first cover story on MCR, as far as I know, the first cover story on Panic at the Disco. I was reading her cover stories as a kid, as a 15-year-old in New Jersey.
I know,
as
a prodigy. I was only 11 when I was writing them. So weird. Yeah, no. But I know it's weird to think that they were just little babies when I talk to them, and now to go to the grocery store and be smacked in the face with Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy to this day, even on the radio in LA, because I still listen to the radio.
K-Rock loves
K-Rock
loves to play
loves
those
a fever. You can Sweat Out. Like, they play it on the hour almost.
Pete Wentz bought his first house with Fever You Can Sweat Out money.
I think I told you that.
K-Rock is continuing to fund that house.
Yeah. If Pete didn't want to do anything ever again, he could just, like, make money off of the Panic money, because that record was so huge for him. I mean, he had the gut instinct to know that this was a MySpace band worth getting off of MySpace RIP. But yeah, it doesn't. How do you think it's held up?
The first one?
Yeah.
It's a fun listen. I will say that I like the first half more than the second half. Oh my God. I feel like we're going just like so deep already. Oh my God. I was about to be like, all right, like Only Difference is my favorite Panic song. I love the transition to the next. We had a structure to this.
We did. I know. It sits
try
right next to me right
our
here.
Structure. We had Fall Out Boy is the first band that we're going to talk about.
Yes.
Fall Out Boy.
Yes.
And had the 2 cover stories.
There they are. Look at those handsome boys.
So we were already going deep on Pete.
Yeah.
So I'll say that my book, I had been wanting to write this book. So a little just quick background on me. I was a staff writer at Billboard magazine, like the Billboard charts, from 2013 to 2020. I was like their rock and independent music industry person. So Fall Out Boy reunited for Save Rock and Roll this first year I started at Billboard. So I was like their go-to person. I interviewed Fall Out Boy a lot, and I got to know Pete pretty well. But it was always kind of like going through his publicist, management, stuff like that. So unfortunately, April 2020, I got laid off with a bunch of other people from Billboard. It was like COVID, downsizing cuts, that kind of thing. The day after that I got laid off, I get this email. I remember I remember the details. It was 4:44 p.m. and it was kind of crazy because when you, especially like there in pandemic times, there was just like, this outpouring of people wanting to support each other. A lot of layoffs, unfortunately. So just hearing from a lot of people I hadn't heard from in a while, all the, the posts of like, hey, hire these people. And it's like, you're like, oh God, man, so many people are out there. But I got this email and I look at the person it's from, the subject line. It's from Pete Wentz and the subject is just, hey man. So I just like, I click on it and it's like basically Pete saying, hey man, like saw like the news today, like bummed to hear it, wishing you luck. We should like work on something sometime. Always enjoyed working with you. So at first I was like, is someone fucking with me? So I called up Gabe Saporta.
As one does.
The most logical thing to do in that situation. And I was like, Gabe, yeah, so I got laid off, and Pete reached out. He's like, oh, you got laid off? I was like, no, it's fine. I just want to know, like, is this like actually Pete, or is this like someone fucking with me? And he's like, read me the email address. And he's like, that's Pete's email address. So long story short, I was like, yeah, Pete, there is something I would like love to work on. My whole time at Billboard, writing oral histories on this stuff, like a few articles. I always thought it could be a book. I always thought I could build it out to a whole thing. Like, would you be down to talk for that? And long story short, Pete was really generous with his time. Pete was the first person who signed on, and Pete really helped greenlight this process in a lot of ways.
Pete knows how to pay it forward and has always been of the mindset that you see the same people on the way up that you see on the way down, and it behooves you to be nice to everybody, which we shouldn't have to believe as a concept, but it is a concept that some people don't understand. And he always talks to people. He did back then. I haven't talked to him recently, but he just was really kind, and he took a minute to get to know you. And you can tell that you stuck with him enough for him to want to continue the relationship. But he's just a class act like that. He probably was doing that in kindergarten. He was probably keeping track, like, who is good at sharing toys? Okay, you. Play date later.
he's like seeing who in like art class is good at doodling, and he's like, this guy is like gonna be like doing merch for my metalcore band
for
someday.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
hey man.
We should talk. Here's my email. He was amazing when I met him. He was still the same guy. I mean, he was playing to many less people in the room, but it still felt like he was playing an arena. It's just that the venue hadn't caught up to that fact yet.
And what year was this?
I'm going to say 2003.
So take this to your grave era.
Yes, because they were playing what used to be called matinee shows. I don't know if they still do that anymore, but in ye olden days, they would book 2 shows a day, one for the youngins at 3 p.m., and then they'd clean everybody out, and then they would have the adult shows later. And, I mean, there's something really odd about seeing a circle pit at 3:45 p.m. on a Saturday, and you walk out of the show, and it's light outside, and you're like, what just happened? This is a weird time warp. But it was super fun. And they just went crazy, you know? That's when they were still doing the wheelie things, and they were jumping, and it was like, you know.
Joe was spinning a lot.
So much spinning. So much spinning. It was impressive, and you just knew something was different about them. And it was, because we're still talking about them 20 years later. More than 20 years later. I mean, that was 20... I don't know.
That was 2005. That was from right before Cork Tree came out.
Wow. Okay, so we're almost at our 20-year high school reunion for that cover. That's crazy. I need to get a board together to decide where we're going to have it. That's crazy. Have you talked to Pete since the book came out?
Yes. I got to chill with Pete for a few minutes before their New Jersey date in Homedale PNC Arts Center last summer on the So Much for Stardust tour, and he said he enjoyed the book. It basically was like he would have had a chance to like kind of like hints if like he didn't vibe with some of it, but he was like, you know, it seems like Pete had, you know, given it the
No
once
notes?
over. Yeah,
No
notes.
notes.
Pete was
Good.
down. Yeah, it was really cool because I remember he was practicing bass and he was like sitting on like a little couch. This was backstage at PNC, and if any of you guys have seen the tour, like their whole thing was they were playing lots of deep cuts, like tracks from like, you know, Infinity on High or Folie à Deux that they hadn't played in ages. And Pete was like kind of like almost like working out his hand on like the neck of the bass, like trying to like play these songs that like he hadn't played. And he was like talking to me, but he's like, oh man, like this song like I haven't played in forever. They played some good ones. They played Bang the Doldrums that night.
I mean, doesn't get better than that. Speaking of bangers, Mikey Way, My Chemical Romance, another really key member of the scene, right? And someone that
Secret
was
like connector everywhere.
Yeah.
Even when he was like super shy, like Glasses Era Mikey, like going back and talking to like all these people from the Jersey scene and also other scenes back then. Like Mikey was like secret social butterfly.
He was a super secret stealth undercover social butterfly who was totally content to have Gerard be out front and kind of loud and brash at that time. He stood back. He would always be, you know, Gerard would be right up there at the stage and Mikey was way back by the drums. It might have been because Gerard smelled so bad during that era. A combination of Warped Tour, just je ne sais quoi, but also the alcohol seeping out of his pores combined with wearing the same stage suit for like 2 weeks straight in 90-degree Montana heat, which is really hot. So maybe that's why he was so far back. But Mikey was always really lovely, quiet, soft-spoken with the glasses on. And then in a Clark Kent emo kind of way, he took them off after Black Parade, and he never went back. And he just turned into a chatty Cathy. But a really great interview for the book.
Yeah, chatting to Mikey like throughout the process of making this book was so interesting. Like I got to know him in a pretty cool space where it was as MCR was he was like actually the morning of our first interview for the book, he asked me to call him at 5. It was 5 a.m. his time, 6 a.m. my time. he was flying out from Nashville to go out to LA to rehearse for the comeback tour. And I remember he called me and he was just getting in the Uber, or he was like about to get inside the Uber, and he says to, like, the first thing he says to me is like, "Yo, could we keep like the questions like really vague for the first like 10 minutes?" Because like he just like peered inside and he's like, the Uber driver is like this dude who's like a certain age and he has gauges in his ears, like he's gonna know what we're talking about. Like, could you keep the questions like light at first? And then like by the time he was out and like going through like TSA or whatever, like then we like got to it. So yeah, no, Mikey was awesome. But Leslie got to like hang with MCR like around the time that Three Cheers came out, when you did that cover story.
Yes, around that time, and a lot in the time leading up to that, because Mikey had dated a friend from high school, and she had said, "Go see this band," and I said, "Okay." I saw them. They were rough. They were rough. But there was, Gerard is amazing to watch, and they were really nice. They were just really nice guys, very personable, very geeky. We got along really well. And when I was living in Cleveland, they would come through Cleveland. I swear, it was every month. It felt like, oh, who's coming to the grog shop? Oh, great, my chems again. Oh, cool. Next month, my chems at the Agora. Okay, cool. And it was amazing because they kept getting bigger and bigger venues, and they were getting bigger and bigger. And the time that they even took to talk with me was nothing compared to the time they took to talk to all their fans, which was why people kept coming back. And they would bring 3 people with them, and then they would bring 10 people with them, and then it was sold out. But we did the cover story in Los Angeles, and that was in an abandoned house, I believe. That had really cool backdrops of stone and stained glass. They're so photogenic. I mean, they look like demons, but they're very photogenic demons. And we were staying at the Hyatt on Sunset, which had a reputation in the 60s and 70s as the riot house, where a bunch of rock and roll debauchery took place. There was no rock and roll debauchery, but it just felt very kismet to stay there and do the interviews. And just hearing from Gerard the struggles and overcoming those, and how he was on the straight and narrow, and he was really wanting to go all the way with the band, you believed him, because you thought, he might be delusional, but he also might be right. So I'm going to just take a bet on it. And he was completely right. And I still have some of the drawings that he did for the inside of that magazine that are probably being stored in a really stupid location that should be better preserved. But it was a really great time. We went to, I think it might have even been the Saddle Ranch for dinner or something on Sunset. And I remember asking them a question about how their parents would describe them as a kid. And it was like my go-to that I would ask all the bands, because that's how I got my color for like, and when they were young, they broke a skateboard, and then they never got over four-wheeled I don't know, whatever. And it took about 45 minutes to go all the way around the table, and they were learning things about themselves, and it was just a really cool icebreaker. And you don't often get that much time with a band, really. I mean, I think I had 3 or 4 days with them.
Yeah, that's insane. Like, from me doing media, like interviewing artists in the 2010s, like I'm so jealous of like you got access. I
did. I got access. I got to be a fly on the wall. I got to go on the bus. I mean, it had its pluses and minuses. Again, the smells. There was so many smells. I wish there was like smell-o-vision on some of these covers, because you really would not believe. And look, the toxic waste, I mean, coincidence? I don't know. But yeah, they were just really green and really excited. So it never was a thought that it wouldn't last. But less than 5 years later, were they even still together? It was so fast. But yet they came back, which was amazing. And you got to see them more recently.
Yeah, no, they're really good. I mean, like, obviously, you guys know.
Are they?
But there's a lot of bands on the reunion circuit where maybe it's like, you're happy that they're still playing, you're happy they're still doing it, but maybe that's it. Like, no, they're still really good. And like, what I think is cool is like they're in on the joke. I think that's best expressed when I saw them at When We Were Young Festival, when they played 2 years ago. They came out with this like really like expensive like film quality makeup on their faces, like basically like old suits to make them look like really like old and like 70 years old, like geriatric My Chemical Romance.
Like Bradley Cooper in Maestro? Did you see
I've been avoiding
Maestro?
seeing that movie
That
so
was
hard.
amazing makeup.
I'll
It
take
was
your
really
word for
good.
it.
Okay, like that.
So they were like, ha ha ha, we're all getting nostalgic. We're going to come out and look like we're 75. Except Mikey, they just had Mikey look normal.
Yeah, he doesn't age.
And I was like, wait, what? I was like trying to, I was like, did they just like forget to do Mikey? Did he just show up? And then I heard the joke was like, or no, Mikey, he had no makeup except for blood on his mouth. So I was like, okay, he's a vampire.
Was it
like,
makeup?
So the joke was like, Mikey doesn't age because he's a vampire. He doesn't age. Ha ha ha. Then I was like, oh, but they looked great. They're in on the joke. They sounded really good.
Yeah, and anybody following along with the Met Gala today, looking at the costumes, Zendaya had the cranberry eyeshadow. Emo's back. Coincidence? I think not.
With it, do you? So they did punk as a theme like 8 years ago, right?
They tried. Yes.
Yeah.
Was that the camp? That was different than camp,
No,
right? There was just a punk theme. Did anyone do it right?
Madonna, I remember like really went in and tried to do it. But where I was going with this, do you think / how long until they do emo?
Well, they're not going to get it right, so they could do it next year, and it's going to be some obtuse description, and then someone's just going to wear a lot of sequins with sheer netting. J-Lo, I'm looking at you. You looked gorgeous, but the dress is wearing you a little bit. I'm sure, but they're not going to call it emo. They're going to call it. I mean, I could see them doing
emotive
goth.
hardcore.
They're going to do goth before they do. They could do emotive hardcore. Yeah.
Just the DC scene.
Yeah, exactly. Like Florida, Gainesville. Yeah, no. That would be hilarious. I just want Florida as a Met theme. I want to see what people come up with for that.
The Gainesville scene.
Yes. Like, this is bath salts as a dress. Not speaking of bath salts, but Panic at the Disco.
Panic at the Disco.
Who do not do bath salts.
Speaking of emotive hardcore.
As far as we know. You had a lot of conversations with Brendan over the years.
Yes.
Tell me about them.
Yeah.
Tell me.
So what was cool with me covering Panic at my time in Billboard was I got to see them kind of when they were on the down and out, and I got to see the ramp up and re-explosion of Panic at the Disco. So I started in 2013. This was just the beginning of Brendan venturing out on his own as the only full-time member of Panic at the Disco, post everybody else. And they were hungry, or Brendan was very, very hungry. And
He should have had a sandwich. Sorry. He just like really opened it. I had to knock it in.
And this was the era of Vine and Brendan being a big thing on Vine, even though like Panic wasn't popping as much. This was when it would be like Brendan from Vine has a band. But what was cool was my first Panic show I went to in this era, it was doing this series called On the Road. The video is still on YouTube, where like Billboard would follow this like a band or an artist like touring for like a whole day on tour, interviewing the whole crew and everyone backstage and that stuff. And they played Miami, Florida at this theater. It was like 2,500 people. They sold it out. And what I noticed was it was all like younger kids who like probably were too young to have seen them even like when Fever came out. And I was like, okay, this isn't like some like just big nostalgia fest thing. There's like young kids who were psyched on Panic, even though just like from my vantage point of just like, I work at Billboard now, looking at the chart, it seems like, oh, Panic is not as big as they were in 2005. And they weren't, but they were on the come up again. And, the next album, Death of a Bachelor, there wasn't a big single on that, but at Billboard, when the thing debuted at #1, it really surprised people. It sold, I think, well over 100 million copies its first week. The High Hopes album, a couple years after that, was even bigger, and they were back to filling MSG again, back to theaters and back up.
And now he has gone into retirement, early retirement, right? We were talking about whether we think I don't know how you can reunite with yourself if it's just him, but...
What about, do you think the Fever lineup would ever get back together?
It depends who you consider the lineup. Is this with or without Brent Sweatpants Wilson?
I think that's TBD.
TBD. Okay, I say Brent Sweatpants because he wore sweatpants all the time off stage, and they would have their costumes, and they would look very dapper. But imagine below the fold here, he's wearing gray gym sweatpants. And it just sort of breaks. You know, it's like newscasters that are actually wearing Ugg boots under the news desk. It like kind of breaks the illusion. But he's a very nice guy, was the first casualty of the band. I don't know, Justin Bieber told me never say never. So I'm going to hold out high hopes. You know what?
When I was seeing them last, I didn't get to see them on their tour for their last album, but the album before that, Pray for the Wicked, I believe they were only playing one Fever song on that tour, and it was I Write Sins. So Brendan, and like justifiably so, had advanced his career so much and it had so many more hits that he could get away with just playing one song from that album, which was insane.
Did they do any Pretty Odd?
They would still do 9 of the Afternoon. That was it.
That was a Ryan song, wasn't it? Dear Ryan.
I think Young Vane, I've seen like activity on the Young Vane's Instagram page. I feel like something might be happening.
I think it would be great. I know there are a lot of people very interested in his story, very interested in what he's doing. I mean, he's been active the whole time, just in LA, and slightly different demographic, but we're here for you, Ryan. Come back. I mean, how cute would that be? Look at them. Look at their little haircuts.
Think of all the money they could make Pete Wentz if Ryan
that's
Ross
not reason
and
enough
Brendan
to
Urie
do
made music
it.
again.
So good. I think the last band that we were going to touch on, which, believe it or not, does not have anything to do with Pete Wentz, is Paramore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was interesting doing the book was, as a kid growing up, just because Paramore was a Fueled by Ramen band, I just kind of assumed that they were super tight with Panic and Fall Out Boy and all the other FBR bands, Academy Is, Gym Class Heroes, etc. Hush Sound, I could go on and on, but they kind of weren't. There wasn't even like one band that they toured with multiple times. There wasn't like another band that kind of took them under their wing, like kind of like Thursday with MCR or Fall Out Boy bringing up Panic. Like Paramore didn't have one of those. So it was a little bit challenging finding other people to talk about their story because they were just like so isolated when they were little kids starting out.
You know, I think part of it could be with some of these other bands, Panic, Fall Out Boy, My Chem for sure, other bands looked out for them and kind of brought them under their wing and guided them. And I think the same could be said for Paramore, but it was all behind the stage people. It was managers, booking agents, production people, because they were a band's band. They were really easy to work with. She's a powerhouse, and they were young and eager to please, but also really hardworking. They earned in sweat, blood, and more sweat, like every inch of opportunity. And I remember seeing them on Warped Tour, and they played the Shearer Girl stage. Does anybody remember the Shearer Girl stage, which was really just a truck with one side that flopped down, and it was hot pink. And they played that in the middle of the afternoon, and no fans, no nothing. And I don't mean people fans, I mean like blowing fans. And one of the stops. They were playing, and they were in the middle of one of the songs, and all of a sudden, Zach, the drummer, just wilted like a piece of lettuce, just fell right off the stage from heat stroke. And they got back up and kept playing. So I think they just impressed so many people. And they impressed everybody that saw them. It's hard not to be impressed by them. But I think they had a lot of people in their corner behind the scenes that just, you know, they weren't on stage with them. They were behind watching the magic happen. And I think you could see that by the tours they did get. And when I did the cover for this, they were out with No Doubt. And I was having flashbacks of it just with Coachella recently and Gwen coming back and seeing Olivia Rodrigo out there and having like, oh my God, that was Haley 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That's crazy. But they, I think, just have different objectives for the band now in whatever capacity the band is, what it is. But I think they're going more of the art rock route. Chris, you agree, disagree? Art rock?
Yeah, totally. You put it in an interesting way because when we were chatting last night, kind of like planning out our chat,
No, this is all off the cuff.
all off the cuff. You were talking about like from like your experience of interviewing Haley and seeing where she's gone, like how like you kind of felt she was trying to like kind of. You mentioned Patti Smith is sort of one side of things, and another artist is another.
I think it was Gwen Stefani even, like just bridging between being a performance artist and being art rock talking, you know, like they did all this stuff with Talking Heads most recently, and that makes a ton of sense because they're also very visual, but not in a traditional way that some of the other emo bands are, but in a bit more of like a, I don't know, they're in the visual arts department at NYU type of thing. They're at RISD. They're RISD. And
good for them because they came from the middle of Tennessee. They came from very, very far away from the arts department of NYU.
That's true. That's true. But they're arty-farty in a different way than a lot of the other bands. And Haley especially has a very distinct way that she wants to be photographed and portrayed, and from every inch of her, you know, the top of her head and the dye of her hair to the toes on her, you know, creepers or Doc Martens or whatever she's wearing. And I think they're going a little bit less mainstream for the purpose of being liked by all and just wanting to do something that they enjoy. And if other people enjoy it, great, which is probably different than some of the things they were doing on Riot, for example. It's like, this is going to be a huge hit, and we're going to work with really huge producers to make huge sounding music. I don't know if they need to be huge, and I think that they're okay with that.
Yeah. Also, have you seen Zach lately? He basically, anytime you see Zach, he looks like a character from a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, he's Steve Zissou. Yeah. Yeah, he's a little
Zach's
cute little
glow
guy.
up,
Who,
man.
you know what? Maybe he got that beanie from Taylor, who's pre-Steve Zissou. He's the cousin, Stu Zissou, and that's his little beanie. You never know. Yeah, but Paramore is not. They're taking a little break, I think, right after the last record.
So they've been doing press lately. They just did an interview with Brooklyn Vegan. Shout out to them. And yeah, they were saying how they're free agents now. They are through Haley's 8-album, I believe it was, 8-album deal with Fueled by Ramen Atlantic. And I don't know. I probably think like another major label is where they'll go. I mean, who knows if they just like renegotiate things and get like instead of a shitty deal that they signed Haley signed when she was young, maybe she just gets a really sick deal that gives her a lot of leverage with the same label. Who knows how it'll play out, but be interesting to see where they go next. I agree with you that it'll be more on like the post-punk art rock tip, but see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like they earned the ability of doing things on their terms. They don't have to pick a lane. They could put out a reggae album if they really want to do. They could do anything is what I mean. And whereas before they had a very specific mold that they were trying to fit into, whether it was from within or outside. And I don't think that you would get them to pose with a bowling trophy today. nor would you want them to. But I think they just, they've earned the right to be and do whatever they want. And if you're not with them this record, then maybe you'll like the next record. And there aren't a lot of bands that it's okay to sit out on a record and you're not going to abandon them completely. You're just going to wait for the next one that is something that you're into. But that just also proves that they've got longevity and they're in the long game. They're not just a flash in the pan, because like a lot of the Fueled by Ramen bands that you mentioned, for better or for worse, where's the Hush sound? Where's Hey Monday? Well, we know Cassidy Pope, but a lot of those just
Greta
didn't.
has a book coming out. Shout out to Greta Morgan from the Hush Sound. Has a book in the works.
Well, Greta was very active in the LA scene. She's part of She and Him and the offshoot bands and stuff. Jams.
Yeah, she kind of morphed out of the emo, similar to Ryan Ross, and got with the LA cool kid
Laurel Canyon,
Phantom Planet, Rooney crowd.
Yes, I love the Rooney crowd. It's a good crowd.
You're the LA person, not me. I'm just
I'm too pale to really be LA. But yes, I did see her driving in a really cute little car. It's very and she was wearing nap dresses before nap dresses were nap dresses. But I think that Greta's incredible. She should have been bigger. But she was a find for the label regardless. And it's great that she's still active and doing things.
Yeah. Real quick, before we jump to Q&A, the cover story, what was it like interviewing them? That was
tense.
Brand New Eyes era, right?
Tense. Really tense. Because Haley had just gotten with Chad, and Josh was settling down with his, I think, then girlfriend, now wife, and there were a lot of tensions, and there were things they didn't want to talk about. There were things they had to talk about, and there was a last interview that we were having that they outwardly said, do we even I almost said the backing band. The band minus Haley was like, do we even need to be here? You're the one that signed, and it was just little old me, and I was like, what? Because there were rumors, and they just had a very big venting session that was so amazing to witness. It was like couples therapy. It was incredible, and I think I still have the tape somewhere. But in the moment, it was a very tense. You could tell that this was a business band. This wasn't a band of friends anymore. They weren't hanging out with each other off stage. They were like, what time do we have to be back? Cool. I'll see you 5 minutes before then, and I'm out. And that wasn't really awesome to see, but you kind of understood it because they were all in such different places. So I don't think that's the case with what's going on now, which is amazing, because I think they're probably back closer to what they were when they first formed as a collective. But it was not an easy cover excursion. But I think it had a good story, and I was happy that they got the cover, because, that's an amazing cover. Look at her.
How did bowling factor into the cover story?
Not my decision. I have no idea. I don't remember who did the photos for that. It was a good shoot. They don't look happy. She looks happy. They really don't look happy. They were all shot individually, I think, and composited together.
Oh, that's guessing. Sad. Oh,
that's how they do it.
But it makes sense.
You think all these people are in the same shoulder?
You just told me Brent was in sweatpants.
Well, this is behind the music. These are the things we don't like to talk about, but it's true. I think it was so colorful. They were so colorful then. So any excuse to just put them in bold colors and have fun. And pretty innocuous. She won a trophy. It says best something, Paramore. Best something, Paramore. I love it. We're at 7:15.
I think it's time to take some questions.
High five. Questions.
We have microphones, so
yes.
When you're called on, wait for the mic. Hi, thanks for your chat. I don't know if you're aware of something called emo night, right?
Which one?
Yeah, so in the city, like it sells out every time. It's at like Brooklyn Bowl or Irving Place, LPR. Do the bands, probably Pete Wentz, have like anything to do with that? And do they like it? And do you like it?
There are varying opinions depending on which band you talk to on what they think of emo night.
Well, there's also a lot of emo nights
There's
that
also a lot
have
of them.
different people adopted as like, I started it. No, I started it. No, this is emo night, NITE. No, this is emo night, NIGHT. No, this is
This of all the things we've talked about, this is the question that's going to get us in trouble.
probably. But they do a really big one in LA too, and they tour all over the country, and they play the When We Were Young Fest and Coachella sometimes. It's like Morgan and not Morgan. There's Little Morgan, and then there's another guy who's not as little. But they're very nice. And the bands that play there seem to be having a great time. I mean, it's karaoke, right? Like, am I right? It's karaoke. And sometimes it's fun to scream really loud in groups of people singing really loud. But, I mean, it's karaoke.
Only if you ever meet Taking Back Sunday, don't ask them about emo night. No further else on that, but
Okay, yeah.
if you met Adam Lazara, I wouldn't ask him about emo night.
You could ask him about so many other things. I would not ask him about emo night. I think it's fun. I've been to the one in LA. I DJ'd one of them. There was a guy in a Burger King crown rocking out on the patio that just made me laugh. And I think it's a good time. It's silly and fun, and they've got balloons that say sad as fuck, and who doesn't want a balloon that says sad as fuck? And you get to break out your cranberry eyeshadow again that may or may not still be the one you had in 2010, which I found out you should not still use. So don't use that, Leslie. But yay or nay?
Yeah,
Yay?
that's cool.
Yay. We're giving it a yay. It gets a yay. Yeah, we like it.
What else you got for us?
Yeah. Oh, there's a mic.
Hi. I had a question about the book. So you interviewed so many people from so many different bands and from behind the scenes and everything. So I was kind of curious, how did you decide on the cover photo of the book out of like all these people and all these bands? Like what about that photo like made it the cover of your book?
Yeah, having the title being a Fall Out Boy reference, I wanted to have MCR as the photo on the book to kind of balance it out between kind of like, I kind of thought about it as like a movie sort of with like, you know, the two leads as MCR and Fall Out Boy, and the two co-stars that come on later in the book are Panic and Paramore. So yeah, Where Are Your Boys Tonight started off as the title of the 2003-2004 section in the book, and then I was like, this is too good of a title to not have it be the title of the book. And from there, I remember me and my editor, Matthew, at HarperCollins Day Street going through some pictures, and I loved the energy. It's the Black Parade Tour, and also, you know, shout out to Mikey. Having him on the cover meant a lot.
Chris, were there other titles for the book besides this one?
I toyed around with Tell All Your Friends early on.
Because I wrote it into your book?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The working title of it was Story of the Scene, but that was like just kind of, you know, how a band, when they're doing like demos and like writes them on a whiteboard, they just kind of have like generic thing. That was like on my book proposal. And around that time was when, like I said, the title for, there's like a title for each section. There's like, the first section is 2009 through 2001, or no, it's 2009 and 2000. 01, 02, 03, 04, 05 is on its own, and every section had a title that was like a riff on a song or something, and then it was Where Are Your Boys Tonight for the 2003, 2004 section. I was like, this is too good to not be a title of the book, so Where Are Your Boys Tonight?
I don't know. Where are they?
Where is Pete Wentz tonight?
I don't know. Let's call them.
So what is your opinion on When We Were Young Fest, and do you think it's like a better or worse version of Warped Tour?
Yeah, it's definitely more expensive. It's definitely would be easier if it was not just in Vegas.
Do they serve water in a can?
There is all of the.
If you were there, you know Warped Tour is notorious for water in cans.
If you like Liquid Death water, oh man, do I have a place for you? It's called When We Were Young Festival. No, the festival was great. I covered it for Vulture. I went out there the first year, 2 years ago. It went really well, because at the time there was all this stuff of like, oh, is this a scam? Is this like the emo Fire Fest? Which was like kind of funny, but a lot of the article was like digging into like the people who promoted it and like booked all the bands, and it was people who went way back with the scene, even like before the years of my book. So like that's why they had such a crazy list of bands so early, was because the managers, the booking agents were just like, oh, of course, like it's so and so who's been like booking Chain Reaction in LA, or people we've been working with since like the 90s, literally. So yeah, the festival was fun. It ran really well. Did you make it out?
I didn't make it, but to me it sounded more like Skate and Surf, which was a festival in Asbury Park. That then turned into something called Bamboozle. And that was really fun. And I mean, I loved it. I thought it was fun when I went to that. I don't think that I have the stamina or the energy to stand that long. So maybe if there were recliners or like tents with air conditioning, like if they had the parent tents from Warped Tour, where I could just go in and just like get a schwitz, like so that I could stand. It's so much standing. I can't stand that long.
I mean, you can be one of the people who shows up at 7 o'clock as for the last 3 bands.
Oh, that's already me. That's definitely me. But it seemed like a really good time. Vegas, truth be told, not my top destination, but they didn't ask me. So I guess I'll go where they tell me to go. But I think it sounds cool. Did you go?
I'm not. I didn't go. I'm going this year.
Oh, sick.
I'm jealous. You'll have to report back on it. Because I think it's all different bands, or is it the same bands?
Well, Fall Out Boy and My Chem are.
Oh, that's going to be good. There's some synergy there, I smell, for your book.
Yeah, it's Black Parade straight through. And Fall Out Boy is the only band who is not doing an album all the way through. Every other band on the lineup, if I'm not mistaken, is playing like their biggest classic album all the way through. So, yes, you will have a good time.
Just stretch before, because there's a lot of standing. It's a lot of standing. Anyone else? Yes.
Who?
I think someone near you, yeah. Oh, okay.
So through all the years that you've done interviewing, I'm curious if there's a band that has been talked about and respected a lot on sort of the back end of your interviewing that maybe didn't make it sort of through to the fan side. And I'm just curious kind of who was well respected in a way that maybe we on this side might not have known about.
Let's go first on that one.
I think the bands that you probably expect in the sense of Jeff from Thursday, top, like go-to person for a soundbite. He talks in sound bites. He was always really great. At least at AP, he was really easy to work with and very interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like he could write a book himself.
Yeah, exactly. You should tell him that.
He should do an event here.
He should. Yeah.
We know. We're joking.
Back in my day, I think that Josh and Justin from Motion City Soundtrack were always really interesting interviews. Justin is so from outer space in the best of ways, and his references and how he connects things together, it makes for a really interesting read.
I mean, Jimmy Eat World didn't come up in our chat, but they're kind of like the North Star for a lot of these bands, especially like kind of the third wave, or like early 2000s, and like, from now like every wave basically. But, just seen as like just four like really good guys who stayed true to where they came from and kind of did things the quote unquote right way. Not that there really is a right way, but they did it a right way. And, a band that I think just pretty much everyone will come to bat for Clarity and for Bleed American. I love their more recent album, Integrity Blues. I think it's hard to find a band who will say even a slightly negative word about Jimmy Eat World.
I also think that AFI and Davey Havoc,
Super influential in this.
super influential, but also just really thoughtful in answers and participation in things. And they were always someone on the list of, well, can we talk to Davey, or can we talk to Hunter or Jade? Like all of them, Adam, like they all had really good things to say. They just cared about what they said, and they had very good manners. Manners are important. I mean,
Yeah, can't confirm. I interviewed them at Billboard.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
have good manners. They say please and thank you, and they're the bands that you can tell know that it takes a village, because they're thanking the venue, they're thanking the merch people, they're thanking, like they know who to thank, because if it wasn't for the people behind the scenes, they wouldn't be able to go out every day. So, yeah, that's a good crop, I think. Yeah.
What else?
Are there any younger up-and-coming bands that you're excited about?
Yeah. So from like the third and fourth wave, or not fourth and fifth wave, I would say from like the whole era, like 2010s, since after my book, Tiger's Jaw and Oso Oso are two of my big favorites. A couple more recent stuff, Awake But Still in Bed, Stay Inside. Some big ones for me now. Parannoul.
I don't usually listen to emo anymore. I don't know why. It's just not in my it's not in my tape deck. But Chapel Roan, love, Cannot Stop, New St. Vincent.
Chapel Roan, I don't really know a ton about her influences, but I feel like she appreciates at least some of these bands.
Oh, for sure, theatrics and cabaret and storytelling and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so definitely, I don't know what I'm listening. I go back to listen to like Say Anything Is a Real Boy. I feel like,
Yes.
like that does not get old. Thank you. That does not get old. It's still incredible. And some of these are just classics. So I just go back to The Well, really. And Chapel Run.
Sorry. So this started with a story about a layoff in the media space or the music journalism space, and there's just been a ton more since 2020. And so I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on like the current state of music editorial, what's missing, how do you feel about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, I did the book thing, I think like what you're seeing is like a shift from writing for a magazine, writing for a website, and it's for an editor, and it's all that structure. I mean, obviously that still exists. Like Nylon Magazine, just for instance, just like came back as a print magazine after being gone for a while as a print thing. So like some things are going the opposite way with traditional media, but so much of like criticism now happens, YouTube, TikTok, just on like Twitter feed, just. So the downside of that is that it's just like harder to make a living off of it, just harder to make money off of it. Whereas like when we were coming up, it was more of just like, something you could go to school for, or maybe journalism in general, but, focus more on entertainment and see if you could work your way in. Those opportunities still exist, but it's just so much harder now. But I think like the glass half full side of that is that it's just there's less gatekeeping. It's more open to more voices. I mean, a lot of like the people with the biggest followings, who you would call like the biggest music journalists now, don't like report to an editor or weren't like hired. They're just someone who has a successful channel. So, you know.
I think that, I mean, when I started in music journalism, writing, whatever you call it, I definitely followed bylines. I trusted people with names. I knew that Rob Sheffield was always going to be amazing. Vanessa Gregoriadis was always going to be amazing. And someone that I read in Magnet, for example, like I bought Pavement records because they told me to. And I don't know if I would have bought them otherwise. I don't know. I don't think that the brand recognition of a writer at a magazine needs to have more clout than someone on TikTok or YouTube. I think if you're a really good storyteller, you can reach people, and that's what it's always going to come down to is story. And people who have a good story and can tell a good story will likely rise to the top of any platform. But there is something, admittedly, that I think is missing from just getting excited, like getting a magazine in the mail and you would be excited because you wouldn't know what would be in that issue. You wouldn't know who would be on the cover. And you would go to your sections and you'd read like, okay, this is the lead review. What did they think about this album? I don't know if we care so much about what, you know, X byline thinks about a record, like because of the gatekeeping. But again, I think you can tell people who just are brilliant with words in describing music too, which is like vapor. You know, it's like dancing about architecture is describing music. So people that are talented will always shine through. And going back to read some of those great stories, even about people from, you know, the early aughts or the 90s, that they followed people for months before they wrote a story is so crazy, you know? Like, there's this great podcast, Infamous, from Vanessa Gregoriadis, who wrote for The Cut, New York Magazine, and she was dredging up some of her old interview tapes from Taylor Swift for the first Rolling Stone cover, and she was playing them, and you could hear everything, and she went to multiple locations in Nashville and Los Angeles, and she took her driving with no one else in the car with her. Like, no one gets that kind of access. It was just I think like a easier, some more simple time in music journalism. But it's cool that everybody's got an opinion. They're like elbows.
Me again. So I just went College Street Music Hall in New Haven to see Hot Mulligan, Charmer, who else was there? Free Throw. And I'm curious, like, can this happen again? I was totally blown away by how people were receiving Hot Mulligan. I just saw Arm's Length, the same thing. And I'm just curious, like, this was sort of a moment in time. Like, can this happen again? And if it does, what does it look like?
I see like a lot of with the bands you mentioned, kind of that. If like we are in the fifth wave or fourth or whatever wave, you know, post my book, we could say, you know, post the popular stuff. You know, I feel like the newer bands have more in common, a lot more in common with like the second wave stuff, like the '90s stuff, like the Jade Tree bands and like the Cap'n Jazz and American Football, because you know those bands weren't chasing major label deals and they weren't chasing like, you know, MTV, not that like, you know, MTV is like a huge thing anymore, but you know, they weren't chasing stardom, you know, it was much more of like a grassroots thing. And I think like you mentioned a lot of good bands there, and I think they have a lot in common, and I think they probably pull a lot of influence from like that second wave stuff and other stuff. So I think like as time has passed, like, you know, like American Football, Captain Jazz, Sunny Day Real Estate, that kind of stuff, even though those bands were never huge, in some ways they feel like larger than life, even if it's to a very specific sort of person. And I think like for a lot of like the bands you mentioned, I kind of feel like that is sort of, who knows, but sort of like history. I mean, like a band like Modern Baseball, you know, who isn't active anymore. Like, feels like they feel like legendary. You know what I mean?
I'm not familiar with those bands. They have great names. Hot Mulligan? Wow. Love it. Live
That's
it.
right. I saw them. I saw them open for Fall Out Boy a month ago.
But I do think you also get a resurgence from people, like generationally, people introducing it to the next one, or the next generation discovering it through a Fall Out Boy. Like, there's still people who want to go to see an opener, and that's where there's so many gems in those opening bands. So if you're not old like me and just go right before the headliner goes on, you can discover your next favorite bands. I think the community is there. People just usually need a little bit of space so that then they can kind of come together again.
So I think that's all the time that we have today. Thank you, Leslie and Chris.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much.
Thank you.